Good day and welcome to 5-Minute Bible Stories, where we dissect, digest, and understand the Word of God. Today, we are looking at another sign Jesus performed. Jesus enters the synagogue on the Sabbath day. The room fills with worshippers coming to observe the day of rest. Among them is a man with a shriveled hand. His right hand is withered, useless, deformed. Perhaps it was injured. Perhaps he was born this way. Either way, he cannot use it. He cannot work with it. He cannot provide for his family properly. His disability defines his life and limits his opportunities. The Pharisees and teachers of the law are there watching Jesus closely. They're looking for a reason to accuse him. They know Jesus heals. They've seen his compassion for the sick. So they watch to see if he will heal on the Sabbath. Their law, their interpretation of God's command, forbids work on the Sabbath, and they consider healing to be work. Unless someone's life is in immediate danger, healing must wait until the Sabbath ends. This man's withered hand isn't life-threatening. He's lived with it for years. He can wait one more day. That's the Pharisees' logic. The man with the shriveled hand sits quietly. He probably doesn't expect anything. The Sabbath is for worship, not healing. He's used to his condition. He's learned to live with one good hand. But Jesus sees him. Jesus always sees the suffering. He looks at this man and sees not just the withered hand, but the years of struggle, the limitations, the shame. The Pharisees ask Jesus a question: is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? They're not asking to learn. They're asking to trap him. They want to catch him breaking their rules. They want evidence to accuse him. If Jesus says yes, they'll charge him with violating the Sabbath. If he says no, they'll expose him as lacking compassion. It's a setup. Jesus knows what they're doing. He knows their hearts. He knows they care more about their rules than about this suffering man. So Jesus asks them a question in return. If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? Jesus exposes their hypocrisy with a simple question. They would rescue an animal on the Sabbath to protect their property. They would work to save a sheep, but they won't allow healing for a human being. How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Jesus cuts through their legalism with truth. The Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. God's heart is always for restoration, for healing, for doing good. Their rules have twisted God's intention. They've made the Sabbath a burden instead of a blessing, a day of restriction instead of refreshment. Jesus calls the man with the shriveled hand. Get up and stand in front of everyone. The man obeys. He stands up and moves to the center of the synagogue. Every eye is on him now. His withered hand is visible to all. His need is on display. The Pharisees watch with hard hearts. They're not hoping for a miracle. They're hoping to catch Jesus breaking their law. Jesus looks around at them. He's angry at their stubborn hearts. He's grieved by their hardness. They claim to serve God, but they've lost sight of what God cares about. They value their traditions more than human suffering. They protect their rules more than people. Jesus asks another question: which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? The question pierces. Doing nothing when you can help is not neutral. Refusing to heal when you have the power is not righteous. Keeping rules while ignoring suffering is not godly. If Jesus refuses to heal this man because of their rules, he's choosing law over love. He's choosing religion over compassion. He's choosing their approval over this man's restoration. But Jesus will not make that choice. The Pharisees remain silent. They have no answer. Their silence reveals their hardness. So Jesus turns to the man. Stretch out your hand. The command requires faith. The man's hand is withered. It doesn't work properly. It's shriveled and weak. But Jesus tells him to stretch it out. The man faces a choice. He can refuse. He can say, my hand doesn't work. He can explain that stretching it out is impossible, or he can obey. He can attempt what seems impossible. He can trust Jesus' word. The man stretches out his hand. As he extends it, something miraculous happens. The withered hand is completely restored. Strength flows into dead muscles. Form returns to deformed flesh. The shriveled tissue fills out and becomes whole. His hand looks exactly like his other hand, completely normal, completely functional. He flexes his fingers. They move. He makes a fist. It works. He opens and closes his hand repeatedly. Perfect mobility. Perfect strength. The disability that defined his life for years vanishes in an instant. Jesus healed him with a word and an act of obedience. No touch. No elaborate ritual. Just a command and faith to obey. The man stares at his restored hand in wonder. Tears probably fill his eyes. He can work now. He can provide. He can do things he couldn't do before. His life has changed completely. You would think everyone would rejoice. You would expect celebration and praise. But the Pharisees respond with rage. They're furious. They're filled with anger. Not because Jesus did something wrong. Not because the healing was harmful, but because he challenged their authority. He exposed their hardness. He broke their rules. They go out and begin to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. The Herodians are political supporters of Herod. Normally Pharisees hate Herodians. They're religious enemies, but hatred of Jesus unites them. They form an alliance based on their mutual desire to destroy him. Think about this. A man is healed. A disability is removed. A life is restored. And the religious leaders respond by plotting murder. Their priorities are completely twisted. This healing reveals profound truths about Jesus and about religious legalism. Jesus values people over rules. The Sabbath was created to bless humanity, not burden it. Rest is supposed to restore, not restrict. But the Pharisees turned God's gift into a heavy yoke. They created hundreds of regulations about what constitutes work. They made the Sabbath about avoiding violations instead of experiencing God's goodness. Jesus shows us that doing good is always appropriate. Relieving suffering is never wrong. Healing is never prohibited. God's heart is always for restoration, always for wholeness, always for compassion. The Pharisees cared more about their interpretation of law than about a man's suffering. They would rather see him remain disabled than have their rules challenged. This is the danger of religious legalism. It makes us cold. It makes us hard. It makes us value systems over souls. Notice also that Jesus required the man's participation. He commanded him to stretch out his hand. The man had to act in faith. He had to attempt what seemed impossible. When he obeyed, the miracle happened. God often works that way. He asks us to step out, to act before we see results, to obey before we understand. Faith means doing what Jesus says even when it doesn't make sense. Finally, this healing leads to a murder plot. Doing good often provokes opposition from religious people who value rules over relationships. Jesus threatened their authority. He exposed their hypocrisy. He showed that their system was bankrupt, so they decided to kill him. What rules have you elevated above compassion? What traditions matter more to you than people? What religious systems keep you from doing good? Jesus calls us to value what God values: people over programs, compassion over compliance, restoration over regulation. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for biblical truth that prioritizes love over legalism and people over religious performance.